up to them to decide, really.
Yeah. So we'll move on to minutes of the last meeting. Has everyone had a chance to look through and approve? Any questions or anything?
Yep. There are some updates on the minutes. Let's see. There's some updates on the minutes in that you granted funding to Stratton Association with some further comments about their distribution and why they were printing. They have responded, and basically they have spoken to the community, and the community is fairly split. They've got quite a high elderly population who haven't even got a computer, so a printed matter is more appropriate. They are looking at options, but at the moment it's just not feasible for them. There are no outstanding actions on the last set of minutes. There is an outstanding action with Councillor Selwyn to liaise with the District Council about licensing and street collections.
Live.
I will.
Sorry. Thank you, Chair. Do keep that live, because I am trying my best to find an officer to deal with that.
Thank you.
All right. Number 4.
We need to vote for the minutes.
Oh yeah, we have to vote. Can we get a show of hands for approving of the minutes?
Well, I wasn't there.
You weren't there, so it's just us 3.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
2%.
2%. 3.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gary. Number 4, public participation. Sure. Do we have anything?
No. don't have
Anyone?
any. No, we've
No.
received nothing.
If you're watching online, then feel free to come down at the next one. Number 5, to consider any business remaining from the last meeting, to approve draft work programme for 23 to 24 and to receive an update on current projects.
So you've received a copy of the draft work programme for 23-24. If you're in agreement, we can sign that off, unless anybody wants to add anything or change anything. And members have received an update by means of an action log. If there's any comments or further information required, and I can provide any, but should be hopefully all that you need to know.
Number 6, to consider any new business, to consider and approve applications for the Community Projects Fund.
We've received one application from Cirencester Twinning Association to the value of £200 to help print their calendar that they produce.
So do we go to vote on that one? So we go to vote on that one. Get used to this. All those in favour of approving? That's unanimous. And then
May I ask a question on that? When's the actual...
When is the proper deadline? I suddenly realised that I wanted to apply for that. Do I still have time, or is that?
Community Projects Fund,
Yeah, there's a deadline this month, wasn't there? I seem to recall.
7 days before the meeting.
Oh, okay.
But we can do it on an ad hoc basis if time's an issue.
Okay.
If not, it'll be the 1st of November, the next deadline.
Oh, they're rolling deadlines. Thank you.
Just while we're on that, perhaps it would be helpful to remind councillors that most of us still have money in our personal spend, and we're a quarter way through the year. I think we've only got one person who's spent any so far. So a reminder to all the councillors would be very helpful, so that it jogs the memory. Thank you, Chair.
consider and approve 2024 to 25 fees and charges relating to community services. So this is our markets.
Members have been supplied with the proposed fees and charges. Some slight increases, some have stayed the same. There's been increases where there's not been an increase for a while. We've tried to keep costs in line with current situations financially.
Thank you, Becky. And then the third item, to consider recommendations in relation to overseeing and approving partnership arrangements and support to the Cirencester Community Development Trust.
Can we just take a vote on the fees and charges?
Yes, of course we can. We'll just go back and we all get a vote on the fees and charges.
I'd just like to thank you for all the hard work you put into that.
Thank you. Yeah, well done.
Thank you.
Right. You have to kick me under the table. Okay, so moving on again. Do you want me to say it again? Yeah. To consider recommendations in relation to overseeing and approving partnership arrangements and support to the Cirencester Community Development Trust from 2024.
Take discussion.
Yes. So, has anyone got anything to add? Gary?
Yes, just thank you, Chair. On the recommendation, on the front page of this particular report, it says to identify the methods best suited to support the committee's final decision in relation to future partnership and funding arrangements. So, just clarifying in my own mind here, the discussion here is how we are going to approach working toward the final decision. And could I just clarify when our final decision is?
Yeah, I mean, you can make a decision now should you wish. That option is available to you. But the current agreement expires on the 31st of March 2024. Our next meeting is November, so we need to decide probably whether we are going to give funding or not by the November meeting, so that it can be put to council in time for the new budget arrangements. So it's quite a tight time.
Thank you for coming back in. I note on the recommendation 4.1, it says that members identify the methods best suited to support their final decision in relation to future arrangements, including the suggestion of liaison with key representatives from CCDT or the appointment of a subgroup and progress accordingly. My apologies for missing the last meeting, so I'm not sure whether those two discussion points were raised at the last meeting, but we seem to have then two suggestions here. I'd be very keen to see what other colleagues feel. We've got, the suggestion could be we liaise with key representatives of CCDT and have a general discussion about those aspects, or, as it's suggested down here, or we appoint a subgroup and presumably have a subgroup of this committee meeting them to try and understand their perspective and our perspective as well. I'd be very keen on hearing any views from anybody else about either or both of those two views and what other colleagues think of that recommendation.
Gary, what he's just said. Jan?
I think if you stop funding, then CCDT will stop paying VAT for you on projects that they pay for at the moment. I think it's a bit complicated, but I believe that does happen, and I don't see why it should carry on happening if there's not at least some. I'm sorry I haven't got details here, but
There is some implications with that. I might say the way.
I think the issue is it's a lot of money that we're putting in. I feel, you feel, that we're not seeing enough being done for the wider community. I think we need to, this is why we need to meet up to make it all a bit clearer and to understand if we're going to carry on paying. We want to support, but we're not seeing any benefit at the moment. And that's the problem, I think. It's because how long has it been running? Yeah. And when it says, can't remember where I've read it, like the things it's done, it's, oh, that's in that memorandum you sent. It just states like Abbey 900, and it's all stuff that's happened. There's nothing new coming along. Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Naomi.
Could I get an explanation on what was meant by this VAT thing, please? Because I don't know anything about that.
I'm not sure I know the situation with that. At the moment, I know that part of the service that we help CCDT is we pay the invoices. So I think the VAT comes through the town council. But I'd have to find out the VAT arrangements. I don't know.
What does that mean?
I don't know. I think because we're VAT registered and CCDT is a charity, but I genuinely don't know, so I'd rather not say and find out the complete situation with VAT before I know.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly not going to venture into VAT territory because that's well beyond my knowledge, but certainly my understanding, please anybody correct me if I'm wrong, is that CCDT as a charity could access more funding and more funding streams than the town council could. And the initial view, going back over a decade now, was the formation of it was to give us access into projects that we ourselves either could not undertake or we couldn't undertake it with the relevant funding stream that CCDT have enabled us to get. And in addition to the point that Councillor Bloomer made about the £10,000 per annum that we give to them, the other key point for me in the report we have in front of us is on section 2.3, where we would want to consider and clarify future arrangements and responsibilities in respect of the Hare Festival Way, specifically the Hares, Abbey 900 legacy, specifically the Abbot and Canon statues and Century Garden. And while I have the floor here, I want to thank and congratulate Councillor Nick Bridges next to me, who has taken on board a lot of the work in terms of getting the Hares restored, liaising externally with other people to get them restored. The key question here, and I caveat this by saying that I was a councillor when this was initially set up, and therefore can remember the legacy discussions at that point. Who will maintain the Hares in perpetuity? Who will maintain the Abbot and Canon statues in the Century Garden? For example, the comment that I recall with the statues was that the bottom of the statues, which has been cut in, rainwater will accumulate in that bottom bit, and over time it will need repairing and restoration and work doing. The reason I think, going back to the recommendation, that we need to have a discussion with CCDT or appoint a subgroup is that I'm not clear that we have a clear written agreement of who is maintaining these things, the Abbot and Canon, or indeed the Hares, in perpetuity. Which budget does it come out from? I'm not aware that the Town Council has a budget. I don't believe there is a budget within community services for maintenance and repairs of these things. So, again, it's an issue that's blurry in my view. Clearly, we all support the initiatives. I'm delighted with the outcome of the Hares. Gives me great pleasure, and the Abbot and Canon. I think it's an excellent initiative. It is merely, we are not certain as a group here, correct me if I'm wrong, of who is going to sign the cheque when we need to get broken ears replaced or repaired, who will do the repairs, who moves the statues from one place to another. I believe our land and property team have done that so far, thanks to Councillor Bridges' excellent skills in getting them to do it. Yeah. But the bit that is unresolved from my point of view is ultimately who is accountable and responsible for that ongoing maintenance. It's written in the report here, but really what I'm stating here is I am very keen to resolve point 2.3 in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Right.
Thank you, Gary.
I would just add to that things are a little bit clearer for me than for Gary, and I think if we try and aim to get something put in writing, that may please Councillor Selwyn. But I can just say that I have had conversations with CCTV, CCDT, and Florence in Beetlestone in particular, and really they are on our side. You know, there is no conflict as far as I can see.
Except for there was no agreement as to who would look after them. It was never made. And that's a big problem.
I, for one, would be loath to agree to a £10,000 award without knowing some of these very important things in writing and having agreements on them. And I agree with Councillor Selwyn that it seems a reasonable thing to ask to meet with CCDT and ask these questions and have an actual conversation with them. There seems to be a lot of questions, a lot of, not confusion, but people were here then and the people weren't there then, and there's a lot of back and forth and who said what, and I think if we have something in writing, it'll be much easier for us to say going forward what the benefits of the reciprocal relationship between CCDT and CTC is. Did that make sense? Good.
Thank you, Naomi. Anybody else got anything to add? Bob?
I just wondered, there's been talk about where CCDT goes in future, anything new. Presumably any new ideas have to come within their own organisation. They're not sort of driven by the town council in any way.
Yes, I think you're right. But we've got quite a lot to do with somebody like Billy who wants to get rid of all trustees and start again, which seems to me to be rather difficult. And I think we need to also get some of the history back again. But when it comes to this question of paying for the hares, it wasn't ever resolved. There was somebody who worked for the town council who left halfway through it. Can't remember her name now. She was part-time.
Brona.
Yeah. And it was never resolved.
Okay, so I think I'll come back to you, Nick. I think going forward we need to sit down with CCTD and discuss all of our we've got a lot of questions to ask, and it's a lot of money, and it's just we want to work. We do want to work together, but we need to work together because it's the money that we're putting into it. I forgot what I was going to say. Nick, you were next, and then I'll come to you, Naomi.
I just want to put on record, I'm really in love with CCDT. I think when you have an audacious goal, they can really go for it and they achieve it. And that's when having something that's separate from the town council, that can apply for charitable money, that's when it comes into its own. And I've been talking to quite a few of the members on that, and I'm impressed. And Billy Cobbett is the new guy. He's got some great ideas. I know he's talking behind the scenes. I'm not going to steal his thunder. You know, he can come across here and he can tell you how wonderful things are going to be in the future. But let's not be all negative about it. You know, there's plenty of positives there, yeah?
Perhaps Jan could clarify this for me. In terms of being able, this is a very practical question, in terms of being able to sit down and have a conversation with CCDT, is this internal politicking going to get in the way and delay being able to meet with them, and therefore delay being able to make a decision either way on the 10 grand past the date at which we end our current agreement? Does that make sense?
Now, I think we can do the bit about the money and things in relation to the timeline we've got in our AGM. I think when we talk together, we must remember this was a government project and that we need to look at what the objectives were and whether we really think we are able to change them. Does that make sense? That won't be easy, folks.
Thank you. Certainly I endorse what Councillor Bridges said, that the end results of what CCDT has delivered have been excellent. And they've undertaken lots of very interesting projects that we as a town council probably wouldn't have done. And Councillor Grono, it's an interesting point in that, I mean, it says in 1.6 that the trust has received £215,000 from town council, 40k of which has been match funding for projects and events. And the £10,000 we're giving has been agreed for this year. So clearly we need to get to a stage where we have an overall discussion of next year. We have met CCDT in the past for various chats, but formalising perhaps a subgroup to discuss their objectives and what they're working on, coupled with the fact that it's also appropriate to point out, putting my town council hat on, that we are currently using this financial year £56,000 of our reserves just to get through our basic services, as indeed are the district council in the room where we're sitting, who are using considerably more. So all councils, because of lack of government funding, are having to use their reserves. So I suppose in the light of the current economic circumstances, we also need to prioritise how our accounts actually look in any consideration, because we simply do not have the money to commit to perhaps the next 5 years at £10,000 a year, because we are gradually using our reserves. And once they're gone, they are absolutely gone. I mean, I'm disappointed that we're using any of our reserves, but that is statutorily the way we have to progress, because we have to fulfil our basic functions. So I'm very impressed with the potential that CCDT has offered and can continue to offer us, but it has to be in the context that the town council are very clear on the ownership of projects and the ongoing maintenance and legacy of those projects. As we've said, we don't have things written down, which is probably why we are at this discussion now, is that we're not certain where to go next.
I agree. I think that's what I was saying. It's the transparency, it's understanding, it's getting everything down black and white so we can say, right, this is our position and this is your position and this is what we can do going forward. So, anyone else? Naomi?
I think I'd like to sort of echo that with the news about Birmingham Town Council, whatever it's called. Yeah, today. That's what frightens me about saying, yeah, have the £10,000 without knowing in black and white what these questions are. And I hate to bring it back to the hares, but if it could be that it were CCDT's monetary responsibility to look after them, that frees up Councillor Bridges' funding to do something else, which would be fabulous. I know that you love doing it, it's great, but if you didn't have to spend your money on it or time on it, then you could be doing something else, which is also really wonderful and fabulous.
Can I just put this in perspective? It's probably only about £200 to be spent on the hares. So I share Councillor Selwyn's concern for the large amount of £10,000, but let's not get bogged down with the hares. It's a tiny, tiny little project within all this. 10,000 is a lot, though. I agree with that.
And I agree with Councillor Bridges. It is a tiny amount. The only reason I think that we're focusing on this as the Community Services Group is that we're not clear, because it's not written down, what our specific role in that is or should be going forward. In terms of would the Town Council have enough money to support the restoration, ongoing maintenance of the hares, entirely possible, given the fact that it is not going to be that expensive. But we can't simply do that without clarifying who does own that, because of course if CCDT do further projects for us, and I'm sure they will, for the town rather than for us, then I'm sure the next time around we'll be razor sharp on having a clarity of who owns this in perpetuity, who is going to maintain these things for the lifetime of how long the hares last for. We can't say that. So I accept that the fact that Councillor Bridges is making is that it is a minor expense. It is merely the principle of we don't know who should be ongoing charging and maintaining these things. My guess and my feel and my assumption over the last 10 years is that it is not us, that it actually is CCDT's legacy. And I believe that unless I hear any reasons why, I don't believe that starting a project means that you don't maintain that project. Is my starting point on that discussion. But I'm very happy either way. I would just love some clarity written down so that this doesn't come up in another 5 or 10 years where we're thinking we're simply not clear on who should be essentially signing the cheques for these things. Thank you, Chair.
We are thinking of bringing them all indoors, where they will be a little bit more looked after, perhaps. But we're only thinking about it.
I know that we should only be coming back once here on meetings, so thank you, Chair, for allowing the flexibility. But I would love to have more of an awareness of what CCDT are planning to do so that we could work cooperatively and benefit both sides of this, so we're actually all going in the same direction. Now, I think we can easily achieve that, and I would love to achieve that. It would make me feel much more comfortable. How we progress the ongoing fees of another £10,000 or another £10,000, bearing in mind the context that we are using our reserves to actually get to this stage this financial year in the first instance, also gives me concerns that we will need to have a very thorough thought about how can we put aside another £10,000 next year when we are using £50,000+ out of our reserves this year.
I think it's a little bit early to actually do this now because, especially with John and Corinne leaving, it's going to be quite difficult, and with Billy developing new thoughts, it's not going to happen in the next couple of months. There's a lot to think about and there's a lot to work through. So you mustn't be... I don't think it can be done that quickly.
On that, will CCDT survive us not giving them 10k within the next few months?
Well, it depends where we get. If we manage to get money from other places. But that's quite a lot of hard work again. There's a lot of things to think about.
Sorry, part 2 of that was, is there, because I'm not familiar with CCDT particularly, is there an expectation from CCDT that they have always been and always will be receiving money from town council, or is it every year it's sort of like, oh, that's nice, we've got it? Like, how is it structured? And I know that you're not Billy. How is it structured in a way that they can't be relying on this one funding source that may not last forever with the 57k reserve being spent?
We've got to find several other funding sources, or we're going to have to lay it down.
Thank
you. My very final point on this, and I'm speaking on behalf of CCDT, because as I said earlier, I go back over a decade on this project. CCDT will justifiably point out that at the original discussion, well, they pointed out to me in our last discussion, so I'm echoing it in the public forum, they had hoped, possibly indeed expected, that they would have some sort of property to derive an income stream so that they could then become self-sufficient. I don't know the specific details of what was said and what properties were potentially even being looked at, but certainly CCDT will point out that they had the reasonable expectation that they would have a property to derive some income stream from. I caveat that with pointing out that those discussions were over a decade ago. So the adverse argument is that they have had many years of knowing that property or potential income stream was not delivered in the first couple of years, and therefore have had 8, 9, 10 years of knowing that they were going to have to move towards a self-sustaining income. And those are the points that they themselves would make. I look forward to them making it when we meet them as a group. And trying to move this on finally, do you think, Chair, that we should have a subgroup to meet them? Because there's clearly, according to Councillor Grono, significant changes of personnel, all of which have been a surprise to me during this meeting because I don't know the background at all.
Thank you, Councillor Selwyn. Yes, 2 seconds. I agree. We should set up a what's it called?
A subgroup.
A subgroup. Yeah, advisory group, because we need to hear it from both sides. We want to work together. Like you say, the two in partnership, we could deliver so much more. I think as the council, we want to feel like we're getting value for money out of £10,000, because there's a lot Becky could spend that on. And, you know, I'd be more than happy to carry on, but it's just making sure that we know where it's going, what it's been used for, and delivering stuff for the community. Naomi, Councillor Bloomer.
You might be about to answer this question. Who will be on a subgroup from a committee which only comprises 7 people? That feels like a very small subgroup. Thank you.
Could I suggest that I am not one of those? I think that potentially some people that have not been especially involved would be very well placed to take an interesting viewpoint on it and not have their views coloured by what may or may not have been said in the past. So I'm very happy that it will probably be appropriate for me not to be on that. And lastly, just picking up the point, Chair, that you made, is that on this same agenda here, we are also faced with the fact that the door could do more sessions if we had any more funding for them, and the relevance of the door to what we want to do is quite profound. I would love to have more. There are things that we are doing as a community services group that we are truncating because we don't have the funds to do it, even though we know they work extremely well. And that feels to me to be a core part of the community services remit here. So I would love to have more money to spend on something like the door project.
Hear, hear. But if you're saying that you think that that subgroup should exclude you, should it therefore exclude Jan? Should it therefore exclude Nick? And who are we left with?
So I can tell you what standing orders says about setting up groups.
Yes, please do.
The options available to
Please
you.
do.
So standing orders says every committee or group may appoint subcommittees and groups for purposes to be specified by the committee/group, subject to the purpose falling within the remit of that committee, which it does. In the event of an advisory group being formed, the terms of reference of such a group should be clearly defined within the resolution, the tasks to be identified by reference to timescale and an end date for the review of the work. Every committee, group, subcommittee or subgroup may appoint a vice chair and co-opt up to 3 non-voting members or individuals at any given time to assist and advise on specific and to be stated matters, subject to this being within the retrospective role and remit of the committee. And the provisions as outlined under Standing Order number 45. So basically you can form a group, you can decide who you want to be on the group. We will, if you decide to form a group, we'll need to meet again to agree the terms of reference and what you want answered and what the outcomes and timescales.
I have a question for you. Does it have to be part of the committee that it can be all councillors?
You can co-opt members.
So we could put something out there to the rest of our councillors and invite other councillors along. And I think doing that, you've got more people that are less biased, shall I say. Is that right word to say? You know, in support or not support.
And you can always speak to people outside of the group. As
Outside of
a
the group
group,
as well.
you can interview people to get the information you need.
Okay.
I would support that idea of asking other members as well, because I think we don't have enough people to do a subgroup just from us.
All of those in support of I can never remember what, an advisory group. Please raise your hands. That's fine. So 1 abstention and 5 for.
All right. So I think what I'll need to do is contact you all for views on membership of that group and terms of reference. I've already started looking at some terms of reference that might be possible, so I'll circulate out to the group.
Are we now done on that matter?
So, yes.
Excellent, thank you. Right, number 7 is correspondence. Any other correspondence received in accordance with standing orders? Nope, right, I won't finish the sentence. And then we got number 8, which is the all-member briefing and wider communication.
So what would you like included in briefing, and is there anything that you'd like to go to a wider audience, for example, on social media? Fees and charges will obviously be released at the appropriate time. It's not something.
I mean, obviously the key thing is what we've just discussed. I'm not sure at the moment does that need to be put out to a wider audience. I think just circulated. No, there's nothing really that in the agenda that I feel that's not that it's not important, because you've done a lot of work, but sometimes a lot of stuff stands out, doesn't it, that you really need to get across. But so
Cool. I'm happy to do those basics.
yeah. Excellent. And then the last item, next meeting, which is Tuesday, the 7th of November at 4:30. Do we have a confirmation of venue?
It'll be here.
It will be here. Wonderful. And that is the end of the meeting. So thank you very much, everyone.